what's going to happen for everyone on the project is basically just kind of from the get-go, from the outset. This is a project that's going to be created and hosted within the BIM 360 web environment, but your team is not going to be responsible for creating or managing or administering the project itself. So from that standpoint, the other hosting firm will go ahead and get the project set up and in place. They will establish the folder structure that the teams are going to be utilizing for the project. But then after they have all of that in place, then they'll go about inviting the teams in that are going to be participating within the project here. Now, I know that in preliminary discussions with Will will be going ahead and taking care of some of the preliminary aspects for your team. Specifically, he'll go ahead and get the project that your team's going to be working on within BIM 360. He'll be getting that hosted into BIM 360 before the remainder of the team begins to come in and start to work on the project. And will also make sure that links have been established to your project partners models that they have hosted up there as well. So for those of you on the call today, what's going to happen is you're going to receive an email that looks similar to this one right here that you can see on my screen right now. Okay. And it's basically now you're going to have a different project name. Obviously, I just grabbed an invitation email that had been sent to me recently, but it's just an email that comes from Autodesk BIM 360. And it's basically telling you that you've been invited into a BIM 360 hosted project. And then right here, you can see that there's this blue button that says go to your project. So now this is going to be very important for everyone on the call. Even though you may be primarily working within the Revit software for the project, again, participating in the design aspect, you still do need to go in and access the project through the web interface before trying to access any of the project files within the Revit software. Okay, so again, you're going to get your project invitation email and you have this blue button right here that says go to project. And so if you'll click on that, it's going to bring you in. And now for me, I've already logged into the BIM 360 site, but for you, it's most likely going to prompt you to log in with your Autodesk, with your email address and Autodesk password, and then it'll bring you into the project that you've been invited into. Now, for the sake of our conversation today, I've created a new project here that I've called Genesis R21 Training. Okay, right now there's still some decisions to be made around whether or not this project is going to be hosted in Revit 2021 or Revit 2022. So I've elected to take you through the demonstration today in the Revit 2021 software because the process that you will use to access your models and get to your cloud hosted projects will be the same in the 21 version of Revit software, the same way it will be in 2022. So that should be exactly the same. But when you come in, you're going to be seeing a screen that looks fairly similar to this. You should be landing inside of document management for the project that you're being invited into. And then you should also see your project name right up here at the top as well. Now, the folder structure, whenever you come into the project, it may be somewhat different than what you see here. And you may also find yourself in a situation where as you come into document management, you can see the folders that have been created beneath the project files area, but they may be grayed out because those are folders that are associated with the other design teams. Okay, but again, and they may also use some different naming nomenclature. They may have architectural or architect, or could be mechanical or possibly MEP or structural. But I've just set up some preliminary folders here for our conversation today. And we'll also go in, I've already cloud hosted some models, just like what your team will experience here from the standpoint of going ahead and cloud hosting a mechanical model that we'll be taking a look at. And then I've also linked in the architectural and structural models that have been hosted into this project as well, so that we can kind of show what that looks like within the Revit software. But again, those are things that will be taken care of prior to the team coming into the project there and getting started. So just keep that in mind. You'll not be responsible for managing the links to the project files there. But I just wanted to call out the fact that you definitely need to take that project invitation email that you receive and click that go to my project button for the first time and log in through the web interface before you're going to be able to see the project from within your Revit software. Okay. So once you've logged into the project for the first time on the web interface, then you're free to go into the to the specific year version of Revit that's going to be used on the project. Again, for our example today, I'm using the 2021 version of Revit, and I have the latest updates installed. And another thing that I have installed that you can't see right now because it's on my system tray bar on my other monitor, but I also have the Autodesk desktop connector installed, and that will be installed for your team as well. And we'll talk a little bit more about the desktop connector here in just a few minutes, because that will give you a drive location from within your File Explorer that could give you the ability to access some of the different documents that may be stored within the BIM 360 hosted project. But we'll get more into that here in just a bit. But when we come into the Revit software, after we've already gone into the website for the first time, right here from the home screen, we're going to see over here on the left-hand side, typically it lands on your recent files. Okay, but what we're going to want to do for the very first time, because this will be the first time that you're opening and accessing your team's cloud hosted project, is you're going to click on this BIM 360 tab right here. And so then that's going to spin, basically what it's doing is it's looking to see all of the different BIM 360 projects that I have been invited into that are specific to the 2021 year version of Revit. That is something that I will call out and just kind of explain is once a Revit model has been cloud hosted into a project on BIM 360, that essentially locks that BIM 360 project into being able to only host that one specific year version of Revit projects into it. Okay, so that's something to keep in mind, because let's say if maybe you have multiple year versions of the Revit software open simultaneously, if you were to try to go into your project from a different year version of the Revit software than the one that it's actually being hosted in, you're not going to find your project file there. Okay, team, so I will call that out. So after you've clicked on the BIM 360 icon here, and just where it says BIM 360, again, it's basically loading up and showing us all of the different, or it's going to give us the ability to see all of the different projects that we've been invited into for this year version of Revit. Now, for me, as you can see right here, it is not landed in my Genesis R21 training project. So what you will do, if it does not automatically land in the project that you're working on, you click the drop down arrow to the right of the project name. Now, in certain instances, you may have to change your account, okay? And so what I mean is, by default, it's landing on my ATG USA account. But if this was a project that was hosted from another partner's account, I would have to hit that change account and go into that project partner's hub before I could go into the project. Now, in this case, we are working out of the ATG USA hub. And so what would be most important for me is going to be to scroll down through the project list or begin to type in the project name up here for the project that I'm actually looking to work in. So in this case, I'm just going to type in Genesis, or begin to type in Genesis, and you can see that it tells me that it's found this Genesis R21 training project. So now whenever I select that, you can see that I have two areas right here within the Revit software. And these are going to mimic the folder areas that we see here within the web interface. So you see it starts with plans and project files. Now, when we're working inside of the Revit software team, the thing to keep in mind is that your Revit project files are always going to be hosted under the project files area. And so what we would do here when we're inside of Revit is we would, again, go into our appropriate project and then click on the project files folder there. Now we can see the different folders that are available from underneath the project files. And now for your team, again, these folders may be grayed out, or you may actually only see the single folder that your team is working out of. The reason that I see multiple folders here is because I'm a project administrator and I have been working in all of the different folders as I was setting this up for today's session. So what I would do though, from the standpoint of a standard user, is I would come into project files, then I would go into my team's respective folder, however it might be named. And then we'll come in here and we'll see that we have our cloud hosted model. You'll see your model with your model, or your model with your file name. We're going to see some other information here. This shows us that this is a cloud hosted model or a work shared cloud model, which means it has been cloud hosted to BIM 360 using a BIM Collaborate Pro license to accomplish that. And a BIM Collaborate Pro license is also needed in order to be able to open and access these Revit files in an editable format here. We can see the last date and time that the model was modified on, and we can also see the user that was responsible for the last modifications as well. Right here, we can see our published status, and we're going to be talking more about publishing here in just a few minutes, team. So this is going to be very important, being able to see and understand our published status here. It tells me right now that there are updates available. And then also you can see the last published date and time and who that user was that published that model the last time, okay? Now, from the standpoint of just going in and performing your typical design process on the project, you'll just come right here and you'll select the model and click that. And so as you can see, it's opening up the model, and this is actually opening up from your central model in this instance, team, is hosted into the BIM 360 cloud. So when you go in and you tell it that you click on your model that you want to open up, what's happening right now is it's basically, for someone that's opening it for the first time, it's pulling the entirety of the project data from the cloud down to their local machine. And it's creating a local copy without it actually calling it a local copy. And it's burying that in what's called your collaboration cache that's on your local machine as well. So anytime that you open up a Revit cloud hosted model, it is essentially opening it up just like you would be opening up from your server as a local copy. Okay, so keep that in mind, team. That's all happening in the background. It's happening automatically for you. Now, one other thing to keep in mind here when we're working inside of cloud-hosted Revit models is once you have opened that project file for the first time and it's created that local cached copy in your collaboration cache, from that point moving forward, anytime that you have made changes to your model and you're ready to save those changes back to the central model, we're going to be using the synchronize button to do that. And every time that you hit synchronize, what it's doing is it is taking a quick comparison of the central model that's hosted in the BIM 360 cloud. It's comparing that to your local version, your local collaboration cache version, and it's only moving the delta change information. So it's not having to move the entirety of the project data, and also in this instance, your linked file data. It's not moving the entirety of that information on every synchronization, nor is it doing that on opens after you've opened the file for the first time. It's only going to have to move delta change information from the cloud back to your machine on an open, or from your machine back to the cloud when you get ready to synchronize. Okay, but it is important for me to call that out, that we definitely want to make sure that we are opening from the home screen. And again, at the first time that you do that, you're going to want to navigate to your project, okay, and go into the folder and open from there. Now, once you've been working in the project, you can open through the recent files area, but I want to call out something within the recent files area that's very important for you to keep in mind here. So for on our recent files, obviously we can see all of the different projects that we've been working on most recently, and it's going to save up to 10 of those instances here. Now, as we're looking at our recent files, you can notice right here that we can see the mechanical model that I just opened up just a moment ago, but we also see this icon down here in the bottom left-hand corner. Almost looks like a little box, but then it's got a small cloud at the bottom of it. So you can open from your recent files. You would just want to make sure that you are opening from the recent files that does have this icon down here, because that indicates that we're actually opening the model that is the central model hosted into BIM 360. Okay, so if I were to come in here and open up, say, this mechanical _21 model right here, this is the local copy that is on my desktop. And if I hover over that, you can see the saved file path up above there. So we definitely do not want to open anything that doesn't have the cloud icon at the bottom here. And so if I hover over this particular file that we're going to be talking about and working with today, you can see the saved path. It goes through BIM 360, then it shows the project name, the Genesis R21 training, and then it shows our file name right there. Okay, so just wanted to call that out. Those are the two different ways that you'll be able to open the file. Again, first time opening the file, you'll always need to go through BIM 360. You'll need to make sure that you've selected the appropriate company hub that you're working through, and then the appropriate project that you're working from. And then, as we mentioned before, once you do that, it's going to land you right here. You'll go through project files and then into your team's folder where your model is going to be hosted into. Okay, so that was just very quickly, just kind of getting started, getting that project invitation email, logging into the website for the first time to establish that connection there and make sure you're going to be able to see your project here in Revit. And then once we've done so, being able to come into the Revit software and open that up. Now, before we move forward any further, are there any questions at all regarding that process that we've just discussed there? Okay. Sometimes no news is good news, right, team? Okay, so now when we come into our model here, once we've opened it up, you're just going to continue to utilize your standard design process that you always have. Okay, from the standpoint of coming in and manipulating your model, making changes, whether you're adding elements, moving elements, or even possibly removing elements, all of that's going to be exactly what you've been exactly the same way you've done it before. None of the functionality itself within Revit has changed. You'll still see all of your different tabs up here. And again, it's just going to be important that we're making sure that we're opening and that we're also syncing to the central model that's hosted in the cloud. Okay. Now, if you happen to be working, and some people are in a very, what I would say is a very good habit of, after working for 10 to 15 minutes, maybe they want to do a save, just do a local save. You can still do a local save on a cloud hosted project just by hitting save here. Now, what that's doing is it's only saving to your local collaboration cached copy. Okay. So you can do that to prevent any type of data loss if you were to have a fatal error crash or anything to that nature. But it has not actually pushed those changes back into the cloud until we synchronize with the synchronize button here. Okay. Now, one other thing that I'll call out for the team is anytime that you open up your project within Revit, you're always going to see the most up-to-date version of your team's project file based on the last person that had hit synchronize to central prior to you opening the file up inside of Revit. Okay. That's very important to understand, but it's also even more important to understand why, and we're going to talk about that right now, why if I come here to the website and I go into my mechanical folder, now I've already preloaded a PDF document that we'll talk about in a bit, but you can see that I've got my cloud hosted Revit model right here. And you can see that it's on version number 2. Anytime that a model is cloud hosted from Revit into BIM 360, it always starts with version number 2. Okay. Now, the thing to keep in mind here is this versioning is not tracking the number of times that users hit sync to central. You've already seen me. I think I've already done it once, but as I'm hitting sync to central, it is saving these changes back to the central model in the cloud, but it's not automatically updating that file and how it appears on the website. Okay. But what's most important to understand is from the design aspect and from your standpoint of working in the Revit software, anytime that you open that file up, you're always going to get the latest version of the file based on the last person on your team that has hit synchronize to central, even if this shows a later time and date. I'm sorry, an earlier time and date for when this was last published to the website. because there's a difference, team, between synchronizing to Central and publishing from Revit to the web interface here. Okay. So we've talked just a little bit about, again, getting into your model here. If you were to go into, now this will already be set up for you, but if you were to go into manage your links, you'll see that we have the architectural model and the structural model that have already been loaded in. And we can see that those files are also cloud hosted Revit models. And you can see that the file path type is a cloud file path. Okay. So there shouldn't really be any reason why anyone needs to go even mess with the linked files that are in there. Okay. We'll make sure that everything is set up appropriately before the team members actually come into the project. But I just wanted to make sure that I could call that out and show your team that as well.